Make this an autumn hike, and even the long winding 22 miles driven from Loomis to the trailhead will be filled with color and can even be moderately enjoyable. From the Iron Gate trailhead, elevation 6,150 feet, the trail starts out easy enough and actually drops about 170 feet in the first mile and a half. After that point, however, it turns into a steady uphill grind for the next 5.5 miles. Around the 1 mile point, we get a taste of the grassy fields that will eventually become the mainstay of the hike. This is horse country, especially in the fall when hunters descend en masse. When encountering horses, simply step off the lower side of the trail and remain quiet as they pass. Sometimes talking gently to them helps reassure them that you are not a threat. At Sunny Pass, we reach an elevation of 7,250 feet, and the trail winds between Horseshoe Mountain and Pick Peak. From this point, the steepest section of the trail is behind you, and the Pasayten wilderness spreads out like a welcome mat in front of you. Rock Mountain is on the left. Around mile 9 is Horseshoe Pass. The trail will soon intersect with 2 other trails, the first leading to Smith Lake and the second to Goodenough Peak. We pitched our first camp around mile 10, just off the trail near Loudon Lake, between Rock Mountain and Armstrong Mountain. The next morning, a thick layer of frost covered the ground, and Windy Peak dominated the view. We decided that the best way to get warm was to keep moving. So, without packs, we began hiking up the side of Armstrong Mountain. After a half hour of hiking, we approached Armstrong Mountain's bleak summit. The U.S.-Canada International boundary marker is in view on the ridge. A few blustery and cold minutes later, we stood at the boundary between Canada and the United States. Standing on the boundary line, one can look down and see the 49th parallel as straight and true as if drawn with a ruler. Take a few minutes to check out the historical boundary marker. On our descent from Armstrong Mountain, we noted that the thick frost in the basin had already melted. This is looking south to Loudon Lake at the base of Rock Mountain with Windy Peak in the distance. After breaking camp, we headed to Sheelite Pass, some 10 miles away. This section of the trail leads higher into the hills where the path was much rockier. In the early 1900s, the Pasayten was used as grazing land, mainly for sheep. By 1912, fire suppression became a priority, and fire lookouts were built on many peaks. In the 1930s, labor provided by the Civilian Conservation Corps helped build as many as 69 fire lookouts on peaks, such as Windy Peak. Many of the Pasayten trails were forged in the process of building the fire lookouts. Our second camp was at nearby Sheelite Pass. Scheelite, named after Swedish chemist Carl Scheele, and wolframite are tungsten-bearing ores that were discovered nearby. Tungsten was used during World War I to harden steel used in ammunition. The next day, carrying only day packs, our destination was Cathedral Pass, about 7 miles away. It's not long before Apex Mountain begins to command attention. Around mile 3 is a cabin of an abandoned tungsten mine. Tungsten ores of scheelite and wolframite were discovered here in 1898. The mine was established in 1906 and in its prime employed about 80 men. The mine's activity peaked in 1916 and remained in operation off and on until the 1940s, when it was determined that it cost too much to extract the ore. After exploring the camp and having a steaming cup of hot cocoa, we were back on the trail. In another mile, Amphitheater Mountain sneaks into view. At last, our final destination, the tall spire of Cathedral Peak. We stood in awe, craning our necks to look at Cathedral Peak. At long last, we headed back to the trailhead, and I can honestly say that the way back was just as enjoyable as it was on the way in. The Pasayten wilderness has many wonderful trails just calling us to return. Trail specs. Round trip to Cathedral Pass was about 54 miles. Beginning elevation was 6,150 feet, ending elevation 7,550 feet, and the total elevation gain along the way was about 1,400 feet. USGS quad maps were Bowerman Ridge, Horseshoe Basin, and Remmel Mountain. This is Mark Whitesell saying thanks for hiking with me today, and I'm looking forward to seeing you again on our next trail.